she was born into one of America's most quietly powerful dynasties, not a conspicuous celebrity heiress flashing across tabloid covers, but a private figure whose family name is tied to the food on supermarket shelves around the world. Gwendolyn Sontheim Meyer's story reads like a study in contrasts: enormous wealth and deliberate discretion, corporate roots in agribusiness, and a personal life shaped by two passions, horses and privacy. This is the story of a woman who inherited not just a stake in a global company, but a legacy that has shaped entire industries, rural communities, and international equestrian arenas. Gwendolyn entered the world as a member of the Cargill Macmillan clan, a family that traces its fortune to William W. Cargill, who founded a grain storage business in the 19th century that would grow into Cargill, one of the largest private corporations in the United States. To appreciate her life, you have to understand what that name carries. Decades of careful, family-driven management of a company that quietly moves commodities, food, and agricultural know-how across the globe. Unlike the flashy founders of Silicon Valley, the Cargill story is about infrastructure, supply chains, relationships with farmers, and the slow accumulation of influence. Gwendolyn inherited a piece of that history, a stake that places her among the ranks of billionaires. But she has used the freedom that wealth affords to pursue a life defined more by horses and ranches than by boardrooms. Her early years were shaped by both privilege and movement. Raised partly in Europe before returning to the United States as a young adult, Gwendolyn's upbringing combined the kind of international education many in her social and economic circle experience: boarding schools, private colleges, and exposure to cultural institutions. That background fed two defining threads in her life: a respect for tradition and an appetite for competition, especially the kind that happens in a riding arena. By the time she settled in Southern California, she had found a home that suited both her private nature and her equestrian ambitions: Coral Reef Ranch in Rancho Santa Fe, a property that would become synonymous with her name in horse circles. Coral Reef Ranch is not a weekend hobby farm. Under Gwendolyn's ownership, it functioned as a full-fledged operation, breeding, training, and campaigning elite sport horses on the national and international circuits. The Coral Reef prefix began to appear in event listings and prize rolls, and that quiet brand building did more than collect ribbons. It positioned Meyer as a major patron in the equestrian world. Owning top-level competition horses means investing in bloodlines, training, veterinary care, and international travel. For Gwendolyn, it was also a way to put her resources into something she loved, while giving talented riders the mounts they needed to succeed on the world stage. One of the most visible results of that investment was Coral Reef via Volo, a show jumper campaigned by Beezie Madden, one of the United States' most celebrated riders. Coral Reef via Volo carried the Coral Reef name into Olympic discussion and top-level World Cup and Grand Prix events, delivering victories and podium finishes that made headlines in equestrian publications. That a horse owned by Meyer would be ridden by an athlete of Madden's caliber underlined Coral Reef Ranch's seriousness. This was not social riding. This was professional sport. Through horses like Via Volo and through partnerships with riders and trainers, Gwendolyn's ranch became a pipeline from breeding paddocks to international arenas. That commitment to horses extended beyond show jumping into dressage and other high-level disciplines. Gwendolyn has been credited with supporting dressage riders and acquiring Grand Prix caliber horses to be ridden by well-known competitors. Coral Reef's activity in breeding and acquiring sport horses shows an integrated approach: select breeding, careful training, and smart placement, with riders who could maximize a horse's potential. For someone living a deliberately private life, the equestrian world provided a public-facing sphere where her influence was felt, even if her name rarely crowded mainstream headlines. That privacy is a consistent theme in Gwendolyn's life. Unlike many heirs who sit on corporate boards or become the face of family holdings, she has taken a low-profile approach to her wealth. She does not run Cargill, and she is not known for participating in the company's day-to-day governance. Instead, her financial position largely stems from inheritance, a slice of a privately held and tightly held family company. Estimates of her stake and net worth vary across reputable publications. The important point is that she holds a position of substantial wealth tied to one of America's most consequential private companies. That combination of fortune and discretion made her an archetype of the modern, low-profile billionaire who acts through foundations, acquisitions, and selective philanthropy rather than constant public statements. Philanthropy and civic involvement have been natural extensions of that quiet influence. The exact footprint of her charitable giving may not be spelled out in flashy press releases, but Gwendolyn's name appears in support of causes connected to her interests. Animal welfare, equestrian programs, and local community institutions are among the causes associated with her. Her participation in nonprofit boards and local philanthropic decisions reveals a pattern. She gives where she has personal connection, where money can move a particular program forward, and where her involvement can stay aligned with her private approach to public life. Yet private does not mean inactive in civic or political circles. In recent years, reporting has shown that Gwendolyn has engaged with environmental and regulatory questions, particularly where they intersect with land use and conservation. That involvement reflects a common dynamic among landowning philanthropists and ranch owners. Protecting landscapes, fisheries, or local environments becomes both a private value and a public policy interest. When powerful landowners or philanthropists engage with regulators or policymakers, it is often framed as a defense of local economies, traditions, or environmental stewardship, and her contact with federal agencies over certain projects is a reminder that wealth owners can wield influence beyond charity, shaping conversations about land and natural resources. What sets Gwendolyn apart from the stereotypical billionaire portrait is the centrality of horses in her identity. While many billionaires collect art, yachts, or technology startups, Meyer's primary passion is breeding, riding, and supporting top-tier sport horses. Coral Reef Ranch is a case study in how private wealth fuels specialized industries. Breeders and trainers depend on patrons who are willing to underwrite the long and expensive process of producing an international caliber horse. For riders, having access to well-bred and well-supported horses can be the difference between national titles and Olympic teams. For fans of the sport, the Coral Reef name represents investment in excellence and the often unseen financial engine behind elite competition. Her equestrian investments also illustrate how modern wealthy patrons operate globally. Horses owned at Coral Reef have competed in Europe, North America, and in the Olympics, events that require coordination across borders, compliance with international federations, and long-term plans for a horse's competitive arc. The logistics are staggering, transporting horses, maintaining peak fitness, and matching horses to riders who can extract maximum performance. Gwendolyn's role as a backer placed her in the center of that world, even as she remained personally reserved about publicity. Alongside horses, Gwendolyn's domestic life has reflected the choices of someone who prefers the rhythms of a ranch over the limelight. She's lived in Rancho Santa Fe, California, a community known for privacy, large estates, and equestrian culture. Her residence allowed her to combine family life with the operation of Coral Reef Ranch, overseeing breeding programs and supporting the riders who trained and competed with her horses. Despite considerable media interest in billionaire lifestyles, Meyer has repeatedly chosen to keep intimate details of her personal life out of public view. Where others might publish memoirs or autobiographies, she has preferred to let sport achievements and philanthropic outcomes speak more loudly than personal narratives. Family life for Gwendolyn includes children and a history of marriage, but again, not much of that story is presented for public consumption. In private, she has navigated the same personal dynamics many people do: parenthood, relationships, and the responsibility of stewarding a family fortune. But unlike heirs who pursue corporate roles or high-profile philanthropic leadership, she has directed her energies into the hands-on work of running an equestrian operation and contributing selectively to community and conservation causes. Her story also prompts a broader reflection on how wealth created in one sector, in this case agribusiness, translates into influence in seemingly unrelated worlds, such as elite sport and local philanthropy. The arc from Cargill's grain elevators and commodity trading floors to a dressage ring or a Grand Prix arena is not an obvious one, but it underscores how capital flows across cultural boundaries. For equestrian communities, patrons like Meyer are not peripheral. They shape the sport's future by funding training programs, buying young horses, and supporting riders' careers. For rural economies, ranches like Coral Reef provide jobs, veterinary services, and breeding expertise that ripple outward. Wealth becomes not just a private possession, but an engine for industries. And yet, despite the enormous sums involved, Gwendolyn's presence in the public record is largely defined by what she does rather than what she says. She rarely courts press attention. She does not publish op-eds or make frequent speeches. Instead, her impact is discernible in the success of riders who have competed on Coral Reef horses, in the pedigrees she has nurtured, and in the institutions she supports. That brand of influence, quiet, persistent, and targeted, has made her both an enigmatic figure to the outside world and a deeply influential one within the tight communities she chooses to join. To understand her place among America's wealthy, it helps to remember that Cargill itself is an unusual corporate beast, privately held, family-run, and enormously influential in global food supply chains. Unlike public company heirs, who might be visible through stock listings or shareholder votes, private company heirs can be wealthy without the constant scrutiny of quarterly earnings calls. That structure fosters a different kind of stewardship, long-term, often secretive, and sometimes internally governed by family councils rather than public boards. For Gwendolyn, that meant inheriting substantial means without inheriting a public platform. She could deploy those means according to personal interests. Horses and ranch management fit that pattern perfectly. There is also a cultural dimension to her choices. Equestrian sport sits at a crossroads of tradition, aristocratic ritual, and modern athleticism. It rewards meticulous attention to bloodlines, patient development, and a tolerance for long-time horizons, qualities that mirror the family approach to running a century-old private company. In both arenas, success is not an overnight phenomenon. It emerges out of decades of careful decisions, relationships with experts, and resources committed over time. Meyer's investment in horses echoes that mentality. Build carefully, support quietly, expect excellence through sustained effort. The public glimpses of Gwendolyn's life, a horse winning a major Grand Prix, a Coral Reef name on a program at Wellington or Geneva, a philanthropic gift to a local institution, tell a larger story about how modern wealth is lived. It's not solely about luxury, but about shaping fields of human endeavor. Whether by breeding a champion mare or underwriting a conservation project, her choices have consequences beyond her property lines. They ripple through sports, local economies, and public debates about land and resources. As we look at her legacy in the present day, it's clear that Gwendolyn Sontheim Meyer embodies a version of American aristocracy that prefers action over rhetoric. She channels inherited capital into pursuits she cares about, whether equestrian sport or targeted philanthropy, and she does so with an eye toward continuity rather than spectacle. For viewers who expect billionaire biographies to be chronicles of boardroom takeovers and political power plays, her life is a useful corrective. Influence takes many forms, and sometimes the most enduring impacts come from quiet stewardship. In the end, Gwendolyn's story is less about the raw numbers attached to her name and more about how those numbers are used. The horses that bear Coral Reef colors, the farmhands and trainers whose livelihoods are tied to those stables, and the riders who have risen on mounts she funded. These are the visible markers of a legacy that channels wealth into craft. She is a modern patron, not ostentatious, but deeply consequential in spheres she loves. That combination of private wealth and public effect makes her a distinctive figure in the landscape of contemporary American billionaires, a reminder that power can be exercised softly and that stewardship sometimes speaks louder than headlines. If you want to know the headlines, show jump victories, breeding achievements, and the occasional policy meeting, they exist. But the through line of Gwendolyn Sontheim Meyer's life is the steady cultivation of excellence, in horses, in land, and in the quiet exercise of influence. Her name may not dominate the front pages, but in the paddocks and rings where elite equestrian sport is made, Coral Reef's imprint endures. And that, perhaps, is the point. Real legacies are often built away from the spotlight, on the turf and in the stables, through unglamorous work that yields extraordinary results over time.